Hello, movie lovers. Welcome back to SignaTeek channel. Today is all about fresh cinema experiences, and I can't wait to share my thoughts on the newest filmmaking its mark. Sit back, relax, and let's dive into the recap of this exciting cinematic adventure. Within the starting of this motion picture, we see Ranbir Kapoor and his family, where we know that interior the motion picture Ranbir Kapoor. His title is Ranvijay Singh, and his father is played by Anil Kapoor within the title of Balbir Singh. Additionally, he is India's wealthiest man who includes a huge company named Swastik. Here we see that Ranbir Kapoor cherishes his family exceptionally much and particularly cherishes his father apart, meaning that he can do anything for his father. But Ranbir Kapoor, whose title is Ranvijay, his father Balbir Singh, does not appear any uncommon intrigue towards Ranvijay, and for the most part, spends his time working. Since of this, he is unable to deliver much time to Ranvijay. But even going through this, Ranveer feels that his father is the most excellent father within the entire world. Advance. Within the story of the motion picture, we see that there's a family work interior Ranveer's house, interior which his sister and his brother-in-law are two included. But since of his sister, Ranvijay gets a small talk about with his brother-in-law. And here we know how much Ranvijay moreover adores his sister as well. As it were, at that point, do we see the backstory of Ranvijay and his sister, which is from numerous a long time back, where Vijay is considering in school and his sister is in college here, and Vijay's sister is prodded and battered by some boys interior the college, by her seniors. And after that, as before long as Ranvijay comes to know around it, on the same day, he goes to his sister's college with his sister, inquires around the occurrence and prepare taking out his weapon and debilitating them to never rehash this botch once more. But when he's returning from the car with his sister, at that point a few other boys begin prodding his sister and chase his car by bicycle. Seeing this, his sister is exceptionally frightened, but Ranvijay hits his car with those boys and hence all those boys fall and get harmed. But when Ranvijay and his sister reach domestic, Ranvijay, his father Balbir Singh, slaps him, and he says to Ranveer that he's a goon, so he sends him to boarding school, after which Ranvijay ponders in boarding school. After this, the story once more comes to the display, where we see that Ranvijay, his sister, tells him that he ought to talk sorry to his brother-in-law, and after that, he apologizes to his brother. But Ranvijay, his father, does not like his state of mind at all, which is why he scolds Ranvijay. Since of this, Ranvijay and his father Balbir Singh get into a contention, and due to the same contention, Ranvijay, his father, tells him to take off the house and live his possessed life. After this get-up-and-go conversation, he takes off the house, and he goes to a sanctuary with his sweetheart and gets hitched there and shifts his life to the USA. Interior. This motion picture, Ranveer's wife's character is Rashmika Mandanna, whose title is Gitanjali inside the motion picture and has children while living within the U.S. They are exceptionally upbeat there. But at that point inside its next scene, we are appeared that a long time of the story have passed. After a long time, we see a totally unused sea of Ranvijay with long hairs and a masculine whiskers. Driving interior India, where he has numerous of his men to his company, they walk straightforwardly to an office building and enter there and murder his brother-in-law. And after that, a big address comes interior the movie here. Why did Ranveer at last keep his brother-in-law? As it were, at that point does a story go to the past for a couple of months to clarify this event to where we see that Ranvijay gets the news that his father has been shot. After hearing this news, Ranvijay comes to India with his family and goes to meet his father, who is conceded to the healing center at this time. But his brother-in-law stops him and doesn't allow Ranveer to meet with his father within the hospital. Within the prepare, he too gets into mischief with Ranvijay, and this can be why Ranveer suspects his brother-in-law, and he begins thinking that his brother-in-law was not a good man already, and may be a danger to his father and his whole family. But after a few time, he meets his father, and after a conversation and so numerous a long time, he concurs to handle the responsibility of his whole family. He moreover gives a part of support to the people of his father company, conjointly oversees his family totally. A short time later, he calls all his cousins from his town, and he tells everyone that they are all his brother, and for that reason, he trusts them all, and he eventually needs to ensure each other's family together. His mission is to find any potential enemies and murder them the difficult way. Ranbir, moreover, assumes and gets it that his dad may be attacked again, and that's why he makes a body twofold of his father, which looks precisely like his father, and he begins sending him out rather than his father. One night, when his dad's body twofold was going by car on the highway, a parcel of goons taken after and encompassed his car, and very another minute, his dad's body twofold was shot till passing. But, as it were, after this Ranbir comes to know about this, and he's exceptionally sad about this. The very next day, when his brother-in-law comes to his house, he shockingly sees that Ranbir, his father, is lively. And after that, we are given to indicate that Ranbir may be completely right, and no one other than his possessed brother-in-law, Ranbir, moreover his brother-in-law, talking to his accomplice on the phone where his brother-in-law is saying on the phone, "How delicately did you assault? Did you check the dead body?" Malvia Singh is still lively, and after that, after knowing all this, Ranbir murders his brother and retaliate for his father, which too clears the story. And we get the answers to why he murdered his brother-in-law. After this, Ranbir goes to his lodging with his men, and there he is resting in, testing his weapons. But at that point, we see that abruptly Ranbir gets assaulted at the lodging, and around 100 to 200 individuals enter the complete inn and begin terminating. And their need is to murder Ranbir Kumar. But Ranbir and all his men hold their position and they battle like a Spartan. And after that, as it were at that point, we see this famous scene from which there's an awfully astounding battle. After this battle scene, Ranbir and his men murder all their adversaries, and the man behind all of these, Ranbir too, slaughters him mercilessly. But right here, he knows that the man behind this, moreover, encompasses a brother, and he isn't doing it alone, but with his brother. But due to this battle, Ranbir has numerous bullets in his body. Due to this as well, so numerous complexes develop in his heart, which is why his heart has got to be evacuated and somebody else's heart needs to fit in. In any case, specialists overseen to spare Ranbir life, but when he is totally cured, at that point Ranbir comes to meet a young lady who says to Ranbir that the one who has given the heart to him was none other than his fiancée, who met in mischance on the exceptionally same day. Whatever point she, Ranbir, with his partner heart still beating, she misses her life partner. After this, he talks a lot, and we see that both of them are beginning to like each other, after which Ranbir too starts living with him. Both of them live from 1 to 2 months. But as it were, at that point, we see that the young lady falls in a door with Ranbir, which is why she confesses everything to Ranbir, that anything she said was lively. Indeed, the one who has given the cabin to Ranbir, she is impossible to know him. But following to this, she tells Ranbir that she's been sent here by the brother of a individual whom Ranbir slaughtered prior. Ranbir answered, saying that I know everything almost you. I know that you simply were spying on me, and you came here to get data, and so I was moreover totally alarmed. Following, Ranbir once more inquires him to tell him everything that she knows of, and particularly the individual who sent her. What's his thought process and why he keeps on assaulting his family? She answers, in spite of the fact that she doesn't know much, but she listened that they are 3 brothers, and among them, one of them is slaughtered by you. Others are alive, and most youthful of them is being changed as body twofold, utilizing progressed plastic surgery so that he can be in correct reproduction of you who will be implanted in your family, whereas you may be busy handling them. And gradually, he will firstly eliminate your father, at that point, your sister, at that point, your children, and finally your whole family, so that he can cause gigantic enduring and regret on the Ranbir confront. She moreover tells him that the one behind all, typically close to your father and granddad. As she listened to him once talking to Ranbir, Dad's on the phone and tending to him as uncle. After this, Ranbir goes to the place where his father and granddad are show and asks them if there was any kind of debate earlier within the family that he doesn't know of. His granddad tells almost his family history that his father had 3 children. Among them, the most seasoned one remained at the town and took care of the father. He and his more youthful brother came to the city and after that begun a company. The most youthful brother's mentality was like a con man and was included in numerous fakes and consequently was kicked out of the company, after which he left India and changed his religion different times, and even had many marriages and children. After a couple of a long time, he kicked the bucket, and his children came to us for part the property. But we kicked them out of our office as their father wasn't included in building up the company. Additionally, their father was a fraudster from that day. His children and their children need to devastate us to vindicate their father. After hearing all these, Ranvijay decides that he will destroy all his enemies and foes once for all. On encouraged examinations, he knows that the eldest brother, whose more youthful brother Ranvijay murdered, is living in Scotland. PJ takes his whole team to Scotland and assaults the house, and in process, he and his team succeed in killing all of the bodyguards. The confront of the senior brother is uncovered to be Indian Bollywood performing artist Bobby Deol, who oversees to elude exterior the house and some way or another goes to the air terminal so that he can take off India and be saved from Ranvijay and his brothers. But Ranvijay chases his foe and catches him within the airplane terminal. Here we see Ranveer watches in a rush to slaughter Bobby Deol, but Ranveer explains to them that this can be his family battle and he is the one who needs to murder, after which we are appeared an epic fight between Ranveer and Bobby. Within the first half of the battle, we see Bobby having the upper hand, but afterward, Ranveer some way or another oversees to overcome Bobby Deol and grant him a chance to alter and stop attacking his family carry on, like family brothers, but Bobby denies to do so. Therefore, Ranveer slaughters him, ending the enemy as he couldn't chance his family's future security. After this, we are appeared Ranveer is at last upbeat and is with his family celebrating Diwali. At that point, we are shown this scene of Ranveer talking to his dad, where he found out that his father has blood cancer with a greatest of 3 to 6 remaining, after which they keep on talking where his father stands up to that. He knows he has not been the father Ranbir required. So, from presently onwards, they will live their life as a family. Almost the minute when we are witnessing a cheerful finishing, and the movie ends here. Thanks for watching our video. If you enjoyed this film recap and want more, subscribe now, like, and share captivating stories with your friends. Tell me which movie you'd like me to summarize next. See you soon.